Welcome to Resoundingly Human, the podcast by Informs. I'm Ashley, and each week we explore how operations research, analytics, and AI are transforming our world, from public policy and logistics to healthcare, education, and beyond. As we continue our special relaunch series, we are joined by a trailblazing leader in both public and academic realms of AI and decision analysis, and one of Inform's annual meeting plenary speakers, and someone who is no stranger to the Resoundingly Human podcast. I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Ramayya Krishnan, Dean Emeritus and W. Cooper and Ruth F. Cooper Professor of Management Science and Information Systems at the Heinz College of Information Systems and Public Policy at Carnegie Mellon University. Ramayya is a renowned expert in digital transformation and decision analytics. He's a fellow of Informs and AAAS and a member of the National Academy of Public Administration, and served as president of Informs in 2019, where he helped guide the development of Inform's AI strategy. He also plays a critical role on the national stage, having chaired the AI Futures Committee of the National AI Advisory Committee to the President and the White House Office of AI Initiatives, and currently chairs the Department of Defense's Responsible AI Academic Council. Ramayya, it is such a pleasure to welcome you back to Resoundingly Human.
Thank you, Ashley, for that very kind introduction. It's great to be back with you again.
So your plenary revisited a concept that actually dates back to a 1986 address by Herbert Simon, the idea that two heads are better than one when it comes to AI and ORMS. Why do you think that insight is more relevant today than ever before?
First of all, Professor Herbert Simon was a professor at Carnegie Mellon and has been quite a giant in many, many fields, including operations research and management science, in addition, of course, to his trailblazing work in AI. His Informs, at that time, I think we were still ORSA TIMS in 1986, plenary, was about two heads being better than one. And he called for bringing together AI and OR at a different time when expert systems were the dominant technology from AI. And his idea was, how do we best combine the capabilities of AI to deal with unstructured data, qualitative types of data, and then combine it with the quantitative modeling capabilities that ORMS brought to the table, and thereby two heads are better than one. I think we are in a different world today with AI, of course, as we are with ORMS. But I think if you think about all the reports you hear in the press about organizations, be they in the public sector or the private sector, struggling to harness AI technology and putting it to work to harness it for value, be it societal value or business value, this whole concept of operationalizing AI. How do you operationalize AI? I think this is really where, again, there's an opportunity to revisit this two heads are better than one metaphor that Professor Simon spoke about in 86, because I think operations research and management science has very much of a systems mindset, a focus on problem solving and generating value from decision technology. And as much as AI there's been amazing capabilities that we see being written about every day, but how do you then marry those capabilities and bring it to bear in ways that organizations, both in the public, private, and societal sectors, can benefit? I think that's really where the opportunity lies. And that's what I'm super excited about and would like to address in my plenary.
I didn't realize Professor Simon was also from Carnegie Mellon. And that's just fascinating that, ideals and principles he set forth then are still relevant today with all the changes that we've seen.
My first PhD student was with him. He was such an amazing scholar, but also a wonderful person.
I'd love it if you could walk us through the two synergistic paths you described, OR for AI and ORAI for societal systems, and how they each help move the field forward.
Thank you. So I think, the broad opportunities really, I think there are three broad opportunities that I've sort of organized under these two buckets, as it were. The first is really thinking about AI itself as a system. As you know, we have operations research and management science for healthcare. We have ORMS for transportation. Similarly, ORMS for AI, as in studying AI itself as a system and understanding its behaviors and how to make it better. So to make it concrete, If you want to make AI more reliable or more robust, I'm sure you and I and everybody else who uses Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude has had experiences with in these multi-turn conversations that we have with the chatbot, where you ask it a question, it gives you an answer, and when you push back on it, sometimes even though the answer was the right answer, it might actually change its answer from right to wrong, because there's this desire on the one hand to please you, but on the other hand, there is a factuality of the answer, right? So these questions of how do you even measure? I think the key aspect here is how do you evaluate and measure the performance of AI systems using a systems mindset and the kinds of methods that ORMS writ large has developed over these years to measure the performance and improve the performance of systems. I think that's the first opportunity. And in my plenary, I intend to provide some concrete examples of how we might address that in the context of robustness. But you could imagine doing that for bias reduction. You could imagine doing that in improving how AIs can be deployed in workflows for efficiency and effectiveness, et cetera, et cetera. So the first bucket, in a sense, is think of AI itself as a system and bring the power of ORMS to study it, understand it, and to make it better. The second area really is to think about, if you imagine how to deploy AI in organizations, the place at which most organizations incorporate decision technologies such as AI is in the context of workflows. So imagine a workflow where, like if you want to take leave, you submit a request for leave, and that gets routed through your enterprise system. Or if you want to do procurement as part of acquiring supplies in a supply chain management kind of workflow. So you think about these workflows, and one of the key questions now that's being asked is, if I think of a workflow as consisting of a collection of tasks, which of those tasks should be done and continue to be done by a human? Which of these should be done by a human with a co-pilot, with an AI? And which of these should be done by an AI? So in other words, how do we decide, given the capabilities of the AI, the capabilities of the human agent, the costs, the economics, the error rates, the risks that you can tolerate, how do we best allocate or assign who should do what in a workflow in ways in which you can responsibly deploy AI to achieve the best benefit from the use of the AI, but taking into account what you learn from that first part, which I talked about. Once you learn from the evaluation part, which is using OR for AI, you could use that base of evidence to actually decide how to deploy AI in a workflow. So that's a second sort of opportunity. So again, lots of concrete examples, but the one that I will use in the healthcare context, if you were my physician in the old days, I mean, you would have to post the consult that I've had with you. You would dictate that consult, and somebody would transcribe it, and then you would review it and then decide to include it in your electronic health record system or the claim system. Today, you have AIs, including a startup from CMU called Abridge, that is a leader in what's called ambient AI, that basically is on your cell phone, and you would turn on the AI prior to the consult, and you would be able to pay full attention to me, the patient. And at the conclusion of our consult, the AI has actually created a transcript of the conversation that you as a physician would review and immediately include in the electronic health record system and the claim system. Here's an example of a workflow that used to involve multiple steps and delays, and as it turned out, required between 6 to 8 hours of what's called pajama time from the physician, because you, after you go home, would have to dictate and do all that work. So it saves time. You're able to pay attention to the physician. So it improves quality for the patient. It reduces burnout for the physician, and it has made the workflow more efficient and effective. So that's a very concrete example of a second category of using OR and AI to think about reimagining workflows in ways that could best benefit both the human as well as the use of AI appropriately. A consequence of what I just said is that the transcriber in the old days is no longer needed in this new workflow. So, how do you think about individuals whose work may be potentially impacted by the AI? And how do we create opportunities for them to find new occupational opportunities in a world that is being potentially transformed by AI? So, this is sort of the societal aspect of the work. So we went from evaluation to deployment, and then saying there are benefits to the organization from the deployment, but then there are societal consequences from that as well as organizational consequences. How might we best support those individuals by providing them with upskilling, reskilling, and other opportunities for occupational mobility, so that again, OR and AI can work together to come up with what we have developed, which we call a skill fit measure, which determines how transferable a skill you have for another occupation, thereby allowing you to assess what's the gap between what you have and what the new occupation might demand, which will then give you very concrete guidance as to what new skills you need to acquire to make yourself ready for what those new occupations demand. So in a sense, there are three aspects to what I'm talking about. One is OR for AI, that is, use the power of OR to make AI systems better and build the evidence base upon which the second piece, which is how do you improve workflows using OR in ways in which you can deploy the AI to make workflows better. That's the second piece. And the third piece is, on account of that deployment of OR and AI together, there are some consequences, and we need to address those societal consequences as well. And that's the last piece, which is more management science perhaps than OR. So I think through these three examples, I hope you get a sense for how OR, MS, and AI can work together.
Absolutely. You said a couple of things that really struck me. One, just this idea of ORMS being used to study AI. I think sometimes we tend to view them as either the same, not the same, but similar tools. But AI is just so advanced and vast that we're using these more traditional tools to study it. I also love the idea of like ChatGPT giving you an answer that might not be 100% correct because it wants to please you. I know not in the traditional sense of pleasing you, but it gives it almost a more human component. And then also this idea of, that it really is a relationship. It's what role do humans play? What role does AI play? And then also for people whose skill sets might be displaced, that part of the conversation is how can they move in a direction professionally, and that they can still have a occupation.
Absolutely. And I should note that what I've given are just but three examples of opportunities. There are many more. And I think there are lots of opportunities for synergy between ORMS and AI. And I've chosen to highlight those that I'm passionate about, that I'm working on, but I think our community is working on a lot of really cool stuff.
Well, they were terrific examples. So getting back to your session at the annual meeting, one of the major points you made was the need for rigorous evaluation infrastructure, especially when AI artifacts like LLMs and autonomous agents are being introduced into real workflows. What are the biggest gaps you see today, and how can the OR community help to fill them?
So, as I noted in the examples that I gave, I think having a foundation of evidence, this goes back to this point about the critical role that measurement plays, and the critical role for us to not only have good measurement, knowing what to measure, when to measure, how to measure. And I think these are all fundamental tenets of AI, where you take a systems point of view. So it's not just about the large language model. You certainly want to understand it and its behaviors in the manner that I just spoke about, or the ChatGPT example that you gave. But when you deploy it in a real organizational context, organizations and people care about the system as a whole, of which the AI component is but one piece of it. So this question of measurement should be sort of motivated by a systems view of the problem. So these questions of what to measure, when to measure, how to measure, and then when you measure it, how can you sort of then use that measurement to guide improvements so that you can actually understand the behavior of the system. So for instance, if ChatGPT behaves a particular way, where it's in fact, there's a documented problem called psychophancy, which is it tries to please the user. So how can we make this more robust in ways that would actually allow for it to be used in more consequential kinds of applications, where for instance, it's important for the AI to hold its ground and not switch answers from right to incorrect answers, because that would be very consequential. So I think so these questions of measurement and evaluation and then closing the loop to make the technology itself better, I think is a critical component of having this rigorous evaluation infrastructure. And I think that comes from, and when, ORMS had going back to, from World War II, when ORMS was invented, to today. I think this has been the systems approach, knowing what to measure, when to measure, how to measure, and then using it to make systems better. It's like, it's our tagline, right? It's like core to ORMS. So I think that's really what we need by way of evaluation infrastructure. And a concrete way of realizing it is what I'm calling digital proving grounds. That is, you need to create sandboxes where you could actually get these models, AI agents, and systems to be tested both pre-deployment, but also post-deployment, come up with ways of monitoring these systems, because AI systems, unlike prior generations of systems, continue to evolve in their capability. So it's important. It's not like a one and done. I tested them, I evaluated them pre-deployment, and then we're done. You need to sort of evaluate them continuously. So I think there are lots of very interesting new opportunities for our community to think about this, but very much in the spirit of what ORMS is all about.
So your talk also addressed, and in fact, we've discussed here a little bit, the implications of this technology for workers, including upskilling and reskilling. What role do you see analytics and OR playing in shaping a more equitable and adaptive future workforce?
So I think this is sort of the a really important question. You can think about this at tactical, strategic, and policy kinds of levels. At its sort of most tactical level, it's this question of saying, how do we think about, if you imagine a workforce as consisting not just of human workers, but including AI bots, if you want to think of it that way. So you have AI workers and you have human workers. How do you decide what kinds of decision rights you want to give AI workers? Today, when you think about a co-pilot makes recommendations, but you, the human, are in charge, deciding what to accept and what to reject. But you could imagine other kinds of situations where you might have the AI be autonomously capable of performing a task and effectively having decision rights over performing actions, right? So depending on both the nature of who you have in the organization as your workforce. So this itself takes a little getting used to for thinking about that you have a workforce consisting of human workers and AI bots. The question of what decision rights we choose to give, for what kinds of tasks are they allowed to perform autonomously, what not. But that first order question of deciding that will then have consequences for what work are human agents going to do. And it's not about assuming that we have a fixed pie and AI is going to do more of it and therefore leaving less for us to do. The pie itself is likely to grow. So there's new kinds of work that might emerge that you and I are not contemplating today. But as those new kinds of work emerges, you need to ask the question in a data-driven way. This is where OR, analytics, AI, etc. can help, which has to do with this question of, if I want to navigate this transformation that is going to come about, how might I be able to take skills that I have, determine which of those skills are going to be relevant for this new occupation, and which of these skills am I going to have to acquire. And yes, you can imagine this type of thinking is very much in the spirit of ORMS. And what I just outlined, both in terms of strategy related to what kind of workforce will organizations likely have, and then what kind of new occupations may emerge, and then tactically deciding how do we best assist workers to navigate, are all in the spirit of ORMS. There's an interesting policy level question, which is what kind of policies do we want to put in place to ensure that the kind of world that emerges is one which is human centered? So I think that's a public policy level question that in turn will yield strategic choices being made by firms about the kind of workforces that they will deploy. And that in turn will tactically come down to individual workers, individual folks making choices. And I should say, if you go further back in the supply chain, so to speak, it goes right back to educational institutions, right? How should we prepare our kids right from K through 12 to college, to grad school, if they choose to do that, to best prepare them for a world that's going to change perhaps more rapidly than it has in our lives. And I think that there are some really critical questions that come up there as well. So I think it's going to be a really interesting, fascinating period, but we want to sort of get ahead of it, not be reactive, but get ahead of it as much as possible. And I think ORMS and AI certainly have a role to play in helping guide public policy, strategy, as well as individuals as they make these choices.
That's a really interesting point, that this is something that, from the earliest stages of education needs to be something that we're thinking about, that, when you're entering the workforce is not the time to start thinking about how to adapt your skills for AI, but to really, shape the education so that it's preparing people for this continually changing landscape. I think that's really interesting.
Right. But it's also the case that there are lots of mid-career folks out there who are facing this change. How can we help them as well? So both our kids as well as the folks who are out there in the workforce.
Well, I think it's very obvious from our conversation so far that there is both incredible promise and very real pressure when it comes to responsibly deploying AI in public systems. What lessons from your own work at CMU, or even through your national committees, do you think are the most urgent for decision makers to hear?
I think we've covered some of these things, but let me sort of highlight a couple of these, right? So I think without a doubt, this is a technology that is transformative, but it's not all about generative AI. I think if you want to think of predictive AI, the prescriptive set of decision technologies that ORMS brings to the table. Remember, we talk about predictive, descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, if you recall, at Informs. So I think those technologies combined with predictive AI and generative AI, I think they are part of a toolkit. And it's not about using one hammer, the generative AI hammer, looking for nails everywhere. It's about right sizing and choosing how to deploy the right set of technologies for the problem at hand. What's been totally remarkable about what generative AI has brought to the table is this capacity for you and I to interact with an AI in close to natural language, and for it to actually act and do stuff for you, which might involve invoking complex decision technologies like ORMS tools, like programming language tools, without having to be a sophisticated, mathematically sophisticated individual. So creating those capabilities where the AI actually understands what it's invoking in ways that it can actually guide and make more accessible these tools, I think is a real opportunity. But to your question of, what is it that that decision makers should be thinking about, I think first and foremost, literacy. I think it's really important that you have significant investments in getting people to be AI literate. You have one group of people thinking, it's like the silver bullet for everything. That I have an AI, it can solve everything, without really being informed consumers of the technology. So it's really important that people become fluent, because people do need to become fluent with the technology, but they also need to recognize what its current capabilities are and what its current limitations are. Now, that's a moving target. If you think about 2 years ago where it was to where it is now, certainly the frontier has moved, but it's really important that we educate people about the technology. The second is there is a lot of concern among a subset of people, perhaps, that either it might steal your job, or it might be used in malicious ways. These are all very fair concerns. So this again goes to the need, I think, for lighthouse kinds of projects that need to be that either are demonstrations of the value of the technology. If you take Khan Academy, which you might be familiar with, Khan Academy is probably the best use of AI for education that you can see. So these are, you can get access to it. It's free. It's available. Initially, it used to be available just as a bunch of YouTube videos that kids could watch to learn math and history and English and other things. Now they've integrated AI into it. It's called Khan Amigo. So you have an AI that actually diagnoses how you're doing your problem solving. Where are the problems that are conceptual gaps in your understanding? So it doesn't give you the answer, but it gives you additional sort of pointers to what you need to go review, gives you new problems to do, so that actually the learning outcomes are much, much better. It's almost like an infinitely patient teacher that's looking over your shoulder and giving you guidance and advice, right? So I think these kinds of lighthouse projects like Khan Academy, can we do something like this to help seniors with navigating their government benefits? I think things like that will go a long way, I think, to people realizing that this can actually be useful, but it has to be deployed in ways that are responsible. We recognize, you just only have to see social media to see how you have all sorts of content being created that very much lead you to question what is real, what is AI, and what is truth. So I think there are fundamental questions related to the potential for misuse of the technology as well. So while I'm very positive about AI, I want to be clear-eyed and realistic that there are concerns, as with any technology, about how it could potentially be misused. So to come back and in a coherent way answer your question, I think first, invest in literacy. Second, and along that investment in literacy, showcase ways in which AI can actually be beneficial, so that people can sort of see the value of this technology. Because if you compare the US with Asia, in Asia, they're way more positive about AI than we are here at home. And I think there is, some work that we need collectively to do to demonstrate what the value of this technology could be. And then invest in things that would actually help people recognize that when there is transformation, there will be opportunities for them to reskill, upskill in ways that can actually benefit them and their families. So I think these are almost public policy kinds of points that I'm making. But I think those are things that we need to do collectively as a society.
Out of curiosity, do you think the reason China is so much further with, understanding and embracing it is just that their AI literacy is a few steps ahead of ours?
That's a tough question for me to answer, because I think, to be honest, I don't know, what the base rate of literacy is. I think they're just, and I don't want to necessarily limit myself to China. I mean, more broadly, Asia. I think you see a greater willingness to use it and deploy it to address, issues of traffic, issues of air pollution, issues of education. where they feel they've been so resource constrained that they feel AI is increasing access in ways where it's not perfect, but let perfect not be the enemy of the good is sort of the mindset. Now, it's also the case maybe they have a different set of values that guide how they're thinking about it than we are. But nevertheless, I think there are opportunities for us to even more broadly adopt the technology and embrace it, because my sense is it's something that will actually help us. And I think the question is one of being able to use it responsibly and be educated about how to use it responsibly.
So now you've helped shape AI strategy at some of the highest levels, from Informs and CMU to the White House and the Department of Defense. When you look back, was there a particular moment where it really crystallized for you the importance of having OR and AI working together in the service of society?
I think without a doubt, this point about operationalizing I think is a critical point, which I think in every setting that I've been at, I've had the opportunity to sort of bring up. So if you recall, when I was president of Informs, that was actually the time when we actually created our first AI strategy for Informs, right? And this was pre-ChatGPT, pre-Gemini. And I think every president that has followed since has, done even more, and we are at a much better place on account of sort of having seen this coming in a way. But if you think about where the true value add from ORMS will be, there are going to be lots of opportunities for OR, because AI actually relies on optimization as one of its core fundamental pillars. And there's amazing contributions from our ORMS community on optimization methods that are being widely deployed in AI systems. But if I think about where the big opportunity lies, you probably have seen reports from BCG, from McKinsey, from that MIT Nanda report that talked about anywhere, whether you believe the number to be 75% of firms or 95% of firms all having difficulty generating value from their proof of concept projects to go from proof of concept to production. You think about this and you say it's like deja vu, because in the 90s, they were thinking about the same question in the context of internet technologies, in the context of other kinds of information and decision technologies, because technology is like the proverbial iceberg at the top of the iceberg. You have people, you have processes. And if you're really going to see value, you need to sort of combine people, process, and technology, be it information technology or AI technology or decision technology together to generate value. So if you come at this purely from the standpoint of AI tech, and not from thinking of this holistically as a systems problem, you're not going to generate value. So this has been, so I've been singing this tune, I guess, about the need for operationalizing AI, and that operationalizing AI, the equation in some sense would be AI tech plus ORMS and its systems mindset, bringing together process and people and technology so that you have the right talent, the right workforce. We just answered the workforce question broadly, if you remember. The right business processes. You don't have to use the current processes, but might have to rewire them. And you have to use the right technology, the right AI tech, which is fit for purpose to solve the problem. That's an ORMS sort of mindset. So when you combine these, you're going to get value. So if there was one thing that I've been consistent about, it's been this one thing, that I think there is this great synergy opportunity. There are many, but I think this one is the one that I would lead with, in my view.
So as an educator and a leader, what are you most hopeful about when it comes to the next generation of researchers and practitioners entering this space?
Actually, I mean, while I'm super excited for them, I'm excited for myself, to be honest, because I think I started my career in the late '80s, And right after that came the e-commerce. Mozilla, the browser was 92. That was like a couple of years after I finished my PhD. And I think there were a whole host of opportunities that came to the fore by virtue of having this transformational technology that was transforming enterprises, transforming society in fundamental ways. And my interest was in how to sort of combine ORMS and digital tech. That was what I focused on. And now I'm sort of living through this again. I mean, this is like, I'm super grateful to have lived through, on the one hand, the internet boom. Then came the smartphone as a platform. Actually, the iPhone is only from 2008. People forget. It's only like 17 years ago that we have a smartphone platform, and then the Android platform that led to the mobile platform itself as the way in which lots of stuff got delivered.
Hard to imagine what life was like before it at this point.
No, I mean, we sort of whip out our phone and can't live without Google Maps. I don't remember a telephone number anymore. And then deep learning came along, and there was this next level transformation now, which you now see playing out with the transformer architecture and large language models. And to be honest, for somebody even who was on top of the tech, when ChatGPT was released in late 22, it caught everybody by surprise as to how good the technology was. And of course, there's been this rapid development of capabilities in the last 3 years. It's like a Kuhnian philosophy talks about, there is some breakthrough that happens, and then there is this unleashing of new sorts of innovation. And that's, I think, what happened with the transformer architecture and all the stuff that followed. But so first thing is, I'm really excited that we have all these amazing things to study. AI as a system, as I mentioned, and all the transformations that AI and OR combined together are having on business and societal systems, and then the consequences of those. The 3 layers that I just laid out in my plenary is why I'm super excited about it. Now, and that's really why I think it's an exciting time. If I have to go back and be 25 again and start over as when I finish my PhD, this would be an amazing next X years, because I think there's going to be all sorts of transformation brought about by both technology, by policy, but that I think are going to be ripe for the kinds of contributions that our community can make.
Back when you first completed your PhD, did you have any inkling that there would be so many significant strides and changes made during the course of your career?
No, not at all. Because see, the interesting thing was I've been through, I would say, 4 big transformations, one of which turned out to be a dud. So in the mid 80s, when I was doing my PhD, and this goes back to Professor Simon's, 2 heads are better than one. My PhD was on expert systems, right? And there was all sorts of talk about expert systems as being the thing that would revolutionize how, this type of technology, bringing human expertise and capability to solve problems. You would remember the Mycin system that was designed to be an expert system that would take the knowledge of physicians and make it available for diagnosis. But then this was late 80s when I graduated, and I studied expert systems. And soon thereafter came the AI winter. Expert systems turned out to be very brittle. They were great for the narrow problems that they could solve, but they couldn't scale. And that led to almost a decade when there was an AI winter. And I certainly worked at this nexus of OR and AI. And then came the internet. So the attention focused on, all the problems that the internet brought to the fore. But now I think we are in this next phase, as I've just outlined. I think I've been, expert systems, then internet, smartphones, and now AI Redux, which is so I've been through 4. And this might turn out to be, again, something that is another step in going to the next. This might not be the route to what they call AGI. I mean, this is artificial general intelligence. I'm personally not convinced, but nevertheless, I think we certainly have made big strides. If you think back to before the pandemic to where we are now, it's quite remarkable, and it's exciting to be studying and addressing these kinds of amazing problems at this phase. So I'm excited about this. Did I know this in the mid 80s when I was doing my PhD? No.
Well, I agree that it is very exciting. So this next section is something new we are exploring on the Resoundingly Human podcast. It's unofficially called Ask AI, where I ask a question to AI, in this case, ChatGPT, and then we can kind of talk about it. And I think looking back, I didn't know the direction our conversation would take us today, but I think this is pretty pertinent to some of the things we talked about. So the question I asked AI was, if I were to bring AI, ChatGPT, to a party with friends and family, how would they describe themselves and, the role they play, the work they do? And I think the answer is pretty good. I'm the one who can help settle debates, write your maid of honor speech on the spot, or come up with 10 Halloween costume ideas in under a minute. Officially, I'm an AI assistant. Unofficially, I make people sound way more prepared than they actually are. So I test I have some parents that I've been trying to kind of explain AI and what it is to them, and I use that on them. And I think they were like, okay, not fully, but kind of got it.
Yeah. To me, AI, and by AI, remember there are all these kinds of AI already we talked about, but we're talking about generative AI, we're talking about chatbots. I think by virtue of it having read and been pre-trained, as we call it, huge amounts of knowledge, it's like having a friend or an assistant that knows a lot about a lot of stuff. I mean, I think I have a broad range of interests. I can ask about, the Eagles or Led Zeppelin and get a good answer, and as well as something about Hindu philosophy and get a good answer. So I think having that, it's this amazing breadth. So it's not a know-it-all in a snarky kind of way, but it's great to have an assistant that you can turn to. Now and its reliability has gotten way better. The hallucinations have come down, but it doesn't have feelings, or it doesn't have, it was like, does it know what it feels to have the top down and driving on a highway listening to Hotel California? No. But on the other hand, but that's a very human experience, is the point, right? That's a very human thing. But on the other hand, you could ask it a question about the chord movements in Hotel California, and it can explain that way better than I can. So I think that's interesting. Yep. And it can do that, and it can do that rapidly, to your point.
Yep, it makes us sound way more prepared than we actually are. So pretty spot on. All right, circling back to a more serious topic.
Yeah.
For Forums members or listeners who are curious about getting more involved in AI and responsible innovation, especially those in policy, education, or industry, where would you suggest they begin? What's a good jumping off point?
Personally, I think our community, be they practitioners or academics, or from other parts of industry, I think they're probably all at this stage quite exposed to AI in terms of the literacy point I was making. They're probably over the hump in terms of being AI literate in that sense. If your question is how can they contribute, that could be one take on what you're asking about. What can they do with regard to policy or education? It depends on where they are. I know almost every university, Ashley, is asking this question of. It goes to your point about making people look like they're better prepared than they are. It's like, how do we ensure students actually have good learning outcomes versus looking like that they are better prepared than they are, right? So this question of how do we best impart critical thinking? How do we best impart learning to learn? Because you're constantly going to have to learn new stuff. how can AI be a helper in helping you learn new stuff? How do you learn to be a good informed user of this technology, to be a good problem solver? How do we stay curious versus becoming dependent on a technology? Like, this is a great enhancer of curiosity, because you could sort of say, I want to learn about this, and you can go in and get more information. So I think, um, uh, if you're in education, I think a really fundamental question that's being asked is, how do we impart education, be it in engineering and operations research, be it in business, be it in computing, pick a field, any field. And I think the question that's being asked is, how should we revisit, redesign our curricula? I think there's even bigger, broader questions that will be asked about, are we organized in a university with the right set of departments and schools? I think not immediately, but I think in 5 years, 10 years, I wonder whether there will be, the reason why we've had the structure we've had, where there's a school of engineering, there's a school of business, there's a school of arts, etc., was you needed that kind of specialization to meet the needs of society. It'd be interesting to ask the question, is that the right organization, or is that going to be different? So that could be both profound changes, but the more immediate thing, if you're in education, I think, is asking this curriculum question. How do we impart learning outcomes in ways that will last a lifetime, but at the same time also give you tools that will allow you to be employable and add value immediately? So how do we balance that, strike that balance? I think is a key question that's being faced, but it also obviously has public policy implications because of this kind of question about education. And employers are asking us a version of the same question, which is, what kind of workforce are we going to have? This goes back to the human workers, AI workers, etc. What skill sets will they need? So I think this these are not unrelated, is my point. So it depends on where you're coming at this from, but you're asking a version. If you're in an organization, you're asking, what kind of workforce do we need? What skill sets should humans have? What skill sets and decision rights should AIs have? How do I get from the workforce I have right now to where workforce of the future? In an education, you're asking a question about, how do I rethink, rework my curriculum to impart learning that will last a lifetime, while at the same time getting them ready for what the economy needs now. And public policy is trying to sort of provide the right incentives and framework for saying, how do we ensure all of this works in a way that is societally beneficial?
Okay, so now how about Informs and other similar professional communities? What role can we play in shaping the way AI is taught, evaluated, and governed, and better serve our community?
I think this is one of the things that I'm hoping my plenary will spark a conversation again. I think there are lots of conversations happening, but I think the conversation about, if there is a specific set of things that Informs can do. I personally think that this blend of ORMS and AI is actually can be a potential superpower in terms of educating and producing a cohort of people that really know how to deploy AI in ways that generate value, and they can do so responsibly. So one of the things that Informs can do is, if there is broad agreement around that message, is to articulate that, engage our community in creating curricula and other such content that delivers on that value proposition. And then for those who are listening to this who are not members of Informs and asking the question, why should I be a member of Informs? The answer is, if you really want to know how to get value out of AI, become a member of Informs, because this two heads, ORMS and AI together, is better than any one of them individually.
As much as I hate to admit it, we're coming up on the end of our conversation. But before we go, I'd love to wrap up with some rapid fire questions, which are really just fun, thoughtful questions.
Okay.
Close out. Okay. Was there a book or article that had a significant impact on your life? And if so, what was it?
Actually, so we've been talking about Herb Simon, Sciences of the Artificial. Amazing book. Highly recommended.
What is your favorite concept to teach or even debate in the classroom?
Favorite concept to teach would be how to think about systems. What is systems thinking? It's a cool phrase, but what exactly does it mean? How do you actually put it to work? With consequential examples, working that out. I enjoy doing that. But my passion really lies at that nexus of people, policy, and technology. That is, how do we get systems to work better using technology?
So, in keeping with our Ask AI question, how would you introduce yourself and the work you do at a non-ORMS analytics party setting?
Person who's has a broad range of interests. I already told you about Led Zeppelin and Eagles, all the way to Indian philosophy and classical music. I'm curious. I solve problems using data and math.
That works.
And consequential problems. And I could sort of expand on that, but consequential problems. Yeah.
If you had to describe the future of AI in one word, what would it be?
Transformational.
What is one professional insight you wish you had known earlier in your career?
I think the importance of people and relationships, and it's not that I didn't know it, but I think it's been it's not about people. People are one of the most important things are human relationships, and I think that's been the one constant throughout, right from my undergraduate days at the Indian Institute of Technology to the University of Texas, Hook'em Horns, to CMU, where I've been now for 37 years. The one constant in all of this is I mentioned Professor Simon and my first PhD student being one of co-advised with him. I think this ability to be empathetic and work well with people, and in a variety of settings, and it's not just about research. I think that's been something I've learned so much from so many people throughout this journey, and I've been blessed in that I've met amazing role models that have made this. So it wasn't like an insight that I wasn't aware of that I've now become aware of. But it's been reiterated over and over again, lest you forget, kind of thing. So
your appreciation for it has grown.
Yes, that might be a better way of putting it. You're so eloquent. So.
Do you have a hobby or personal interest that you think might surprise people?
Personal interest. I mean, I don't know how many people know that I really like 80s rock, on the one hand, to Indian classical music, to Western classical. So I have a that's usually they don't go hand in hand. So it's not like you listen to Led Zeppelin and Stairway to Heaven and then listen to Brahms, but it works.
Music as the soundtrack for your life. So depending on what's going on, you need a different soundtrack.
Yeah, I have a sort of bandwidth is wide, if you want to think of it in telecom terms.
I appreciate that. I personally was raised on 80s country Western, but am also a tremendous classic rock and Led Zeppelin fan. So
we have something in common. There you go, Ashley.
All right, last one. What's at the top of your bucket list? It can be either personal or professional.
I love spending time with my wife and kids and traveling. We love to go abroad and right here in the U.S. I mean, we've probably been to many, many, many states. So travel and maximizing time with family, I would say is my top of the list.
Excellent answer. Today's conversation reminded us that the most powerful innovations don't come from a single breakthrough. They come from synergy. As Dr. Krishnan shared, the future of AI and ORMS lies in how we combine them to support meaningful, measurable, and responsible decision-making for systems, organizations, and society. To learn more about Dr. Krishnan's work in his Informs annual meeting plenary, check out the show notes at resoundinglyhuman.com. Ramayya, thank you again so much for being a part of this conversation. It was so, so wonderful to talk to you again.
Thank you again for the opportunity. It's great being with you.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode of Resoundingly Human. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with your colleagues and students. We'll see you next time.